Well, to everybody on the East Coast, good early evening. Out in the UK, good later evening. West Coast, good middle of the afternoon. Here we are, Thanksgiving Eve, November 27th, 2024. This is episode number 181 of Material Issues. I'm Mark Hershberger of Pop Detective Records. I'm over here in balmy South Jersey. Looking forward to Thanksgiving tomorrow. Joining me, as always, my very good friend. He's over on the other coast, Southern California to be almost exact, Mr. David Bash, the president of the International Pop Overthrow Festival. And he's not just a client, he is part of the Back Aching Club for Men right now. David, how the heck are you?
Well, as you mentioned, I am having back issues, although it's not actually my back that's aching as much as it is my legs. But, without getting into it too deeply, I have a pinched nerve, and it's affecting. When I make certain movements, I feel a lot of pain going down my legs, and even walking puts a lot of strain on. So, it hasn't been fun. I was supposed to have a doctor's appointment, a consultation, and that got postponed, not because of me, but the doctor was ill. How about that? So I have to wait till next week, and I really want a cortisone shot. But until I see I see somebody who can determine whether or not that's needed or even advised, given the heart situation. Until then, I'm not going to be able to get one. So I'm trying to make it on meds, and that hasn't been easy. Well,
Yeah, but you know what? IPO's finished for the year, so to speak, right? You don't get back into it till next year.
Unfortunately, I missed 2 out of the last 3 because of this. Thankful I was able to go to New York because my wife Rena was able to accompany me. But Toronto she couldn't make, and so I didn't go either. And but at least from all accounts, it went really, really well.
Good.
So I'm glad of that. And I actually did something, I've missed a handful of IPOs over the years, but I actually did something that I'd never done in that case, which was write out intros, things I probably would have said had I been there. And they were read. So at least my aura was there, if not,
Nice.
if not my actual body.
Yeah, I love it.
So that went well. But now I don't have any IPOs until mid-April when we go back to Chicago.
Yeah, that'll give you time to get things worked out with your back and feeling better too.
Hopefully recuperate. Hopefully lose a little bit of this weight that I've been putting on, because that obviously puts a lot of extra pressure on the nerve. So that's not helping either. But
good.
But I'm glad to be home and not have too much stress on me, both physically and mentally. Looking forward to being able to do my top 100 of 2024.
Everybody looks forward to that. Yeah,
we can devote an episode towards that.
Yep, that'd be great. And Thanksgiving's tomorrow, so we got a lot to be thankful for, my friend.
This is true.
Yeah.
Rena's going to make turkey chili, and we're just going to hang out and in a quiet Thanksgiving, watch football. Hopefully, Miami Dolphins beat the Green Bay Packers in Green Bay. That's a tall order, but hey. That's why they play the games, as
that's
Chris
why
Berman
they play
used
it.
to say. So maybe we'll come out victorious. But
hey, Brian, nice to see you, Brian.
Jive turkeys, huh?
Thank you, Tim. How you doing, Tim?
Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much.
Nice. All right.
Didn't the Ohio Players have an album called Jive Turkey? I think they did.
I think it was Ohio Players. Yeah, I think you're right. We'll have to bring it up in next week's episode.
Who actually made that term famous? Was it Flip Wilson or Red?
Might have been Flip Wilson. Yeah, I think I would almost bet on Flip Wilson.
That sounds about right. But anyway,
I love it. I miss it.
enough of this digression. We have a
All
special
right.
guest today.
It's going to be awesome.
She has done something that nobody else can claim to have done, and nobody else ever will do. She was the last person to interview John Lennon, along with Yoko, just hours before he was shot and killed tragically. And that's the centerpiece of this book that she's written, Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper: My Life Leading Up to John Lennon's Last Interview. And in here, it talks about that, along with the interviews that she did with two of the other Beatles, George and Paul, her time at KFRC Radio, working her way up to producer, then doing a whole bunch of RKO specials, including one called Top 100 of the 70s. I really need to ask about that because that's my bailiwick. But
nice.
Yeah, I mean, as she said in the book and in interviews, the interview with John and Yoko was the best day of her life and the worst day of her life. And
understandable.
It's all very, very interesting and provocative. So let's bring her on. Would you please give a huge material issues welcome to Laurie Kaye?
And there she is.
Hey, Laurie.
Hi.
Wow. There's an aura, Laurie, about just the fact that you did what you did right before the tragedy that we all know of. And you've also interviewed, three of the four Beatles. When do you need to get an interview with Ringo yet so you can actually have it all on your resume, 4 for 4?
I've wanted to for over 40 years. And funny enough, this past summer, July 7th, which was Ringo's 84th birthday, I went to his outdoor birthday celebration at a park in Beverly Hills, where he donated a beautiful statue that he came up with and stood in front of it and hung out and talked to everybody. And it was really cool, even though I wasn't an invited guest. I was there. It was really wonderful. And I got to bring him a signed copy of my book and give it to one of his staff members. So hopefully he got it and has a chance to read it and loves it. And maybe one day I will be able to. I can still keep my fingers crossed and hope, It's like I waited over 40 years to be able to talk to Sean Lennon too, John and Yoko's son. And I finally was able to do that this year. So it's a big year. It was at the screening of his movie that was about to become an Academy Award winner. And the short automated animated film. And it was an amazing thing to see. And when I told him that I was the person who conducted his dad's last interview, he was incredibly shocked and incredibly excited. And I gave him the signed copy of my book, and he was once again really excited. And then I asked him, I said, Sean, by any chance, did your mother give you the toy that I brought for you that day? Because I always wanted to find out. And he said, toy? What toy? And I said, oh, it was a wind-up metal fire-breathing dragon that when you wound it up would make noise and brighten up and walk along. And he went, oh my God, that was my favorite toy as a child.
Oh, wow.
So I was so excited to hear that. So that and meeting up with Ringo also has made this year incredible for me.
Well, two things, Laurie. So first of all, what would really constitute an interview so you could say you got 4 for 4? I'm thinking if you just went up to Ringo and said, Ringo, are you having a good day? And if he just went, yes, that's kind of an interview. And you could say I'm 4 for 4. But in your mind, you would like to go deeper, I'm sure.
Well, the thing is because I'm a rock radio special planner and writer and co-producer, so many of them. And that's what I ended up doing with all of the interviews I did. John, Paul, George. And then I also had a great interview with George Martin, the incredible Fab Four producer, when his book came out. All You Need Is Ears. And he
Mhm.
was so complimentary about the special that he'd seen of mine, RKO Presents the Beatles, which had been originally 14 hours, the longest Beatles special ever created in the United States for the radio. And about a year after it came out, which was 1977, it got syndicated so it could run all over the world, not just a
Wow.
country. And we got to expand it to 17 hours. And we got to change the name to the title I first came up with, which I wanted to use from the beginning, which was The Beatles from Liverpool to Legend, which is how people all over the world know it. So
Yeah.
that was
Wow.
really exciting to hear George Martin compliment me so much about that.
Is
And I
it,
was
does
able
it
to
still,
use
is it
him.
still able to be heard? Is it online somewhere?
Well, technically, I can't really say because RKO Radio Network went out of business and was sold to another company, and they haven't released it. And people who illegally put parts of it on YouTube or whatever, it's not generally very good quality. And it's certainly not the whole thing. And they try to do things like add video, which of course wasn't part of it because it's a radio special. But yes, you can hear certain things like that, but I'm not allowed to put it out because that would be a
Yeah.
legal issue for me.
That makes absolute sense. Now, I know you alluded to the toy, and for those people who maybe haven't bought the book yet, which you have to, that's number one. But number two, you talked about telling Sean about this. Can you just kind of rewind a little bit and talk about what this toy was and why you even brought it and and how, as I heard it, John Lennon himself didn't want to really give the toy to Sean because he liked it so much.
Well, when I travel to interviews, for example, the one before John Lennon was Paul McCartney in June of 1979. My RKO team and I always bring things, and what we brought to Paul McCartney was a bottle of his favorite booze, and he was so thrilled, you know.
And what booze is that? I don't know what his favorite booze is.
I believe that's in my book.
Oh, okay. There we go. If you need
And
to know what Paul McCartney's favorite booze is, Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper, you gotta buy the book.
well, that was his favorite booze then. I don't know that it still is. It could have changed.
Well,
It's
it could very much
quite
so,
a
but
few
it's in the
years.
book.
But anyway, the things that I wanted to bring for the John Lennon interview, I did solely because one book that I've always had for at least several years before the John and Yoko interview was her book, Grapefruit, which was so exciting for me. And here, I'll show it to you. Here's my copy. And I brought it, and they were so excited because they hadn't seen this edition in years. And this is the second edition because John wrote the intro to it. And he begged me, he said, Laurie, please, will you let me interview it? Will you let me autograph it along with Yoko? And I said,
No.
Oh my God, yes, of course. And he and Yoko both gave me beautiful, stirring, loving, incredible autographs. And the amazing thing was, I realized when I wrote my book, everybody who could see that would say, Oh, I wish I had it for myself. So I put it in my book.
Yes.
So there, right there in the front, everybody has their own John Lennon autograph and Yoko Ono autograph. So that's my gift to them. And the other thing I brought was because that was for John and Yoko, bringing my copy of Grapefruit. But for Sean, I went to Chinatown in San Francisco and I got this incredible, crazy wind up metal dragon toy. You wind it up, it walks, it breathes fire and makes noise. And I thought, oh, any little 5-year-old's gonna love this because I love it. And sure enough, when I brought it there, the first person we met up with was Yoko, and she said, "Oh my God, John's going to love it. He probably won't want to give it to Sean. He'll want to keep it himself." And that's exactly what John said when he saw it, that he thought Sean would love it, but he wasn't sure he was going to give it to him. So that's why I wondered, after John was shot and killed, did Yoko give Sean the toy, not just because John may not have wanted to, but because it might have made Yoko feel uncomfortable. But as I found out this year, it turns out she did. And as he said, it was his favorite toy as a kid. So
isn't that amazing?
That made me feel great.
Oh,
I know this may not be a completely fair question, because I know George Harrison, you did a phone interview, and the other two you were there in person. But would you say John? I mean, this is what I've been told by people who knew them all. Would you say John was the most genuine, down to earth of the three?
I would say they were all genuine and they were all down to earth. And the reason I should say is that George was a phone interview was because it was all basically minutes before I had to finish writing the top 100 of the 70s. And of course, he had a song that was going to be in that. So it had to be really quick, and it couldn't wait until he came to San Francisco. And I couldn't leave San Francisco at the time because I was working on a daily basis in the newsroom and, at KFRC. So we had to do it fast. And the other two interviews that were sort of the same for reasoning why they weren't in person was David Bowie and Mick Jagger. And they were all incredible interviews, even though they were on the phone. So they were all so real and so sensitive. And well, one of the cool things about Mick Jagger was when he called to say, that he was ready for the interview. I said, "Oh my God, Mick, I'm just about to go on the air for a newscast. Can I call you back in a few minutes?" And he said, "No, just put me on hold. I'll listen to your newscast." And so part of me was like, "Oh my God, Mick Jagger is going to be listening to me. I'm
no
so
pressure."
nervous." But he said afterwards, "Wow, you were great." So that made me feel incredible.
It was so cool that he actually held on while you were doing. He didn't just go. I mean, that was excellent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was able to tell him about the first time I saw the Rolling Stones, having won tickets to the Rolling Stones Nicaragua benefit at the Forum here in LA. And he was so thrilled when I told him, "Yeah, we were sitting in the front row. Those are the tickets I won. And you looked great, incredible. And so did the rest of the band." And he just loved hearing about that.
I think we put, people who are fans, so to speak, you put a lot of like, this is how they must be, to their personalities. That when in actuality, if you get to talk to them, like you've talked to many, many people, most of them probably really are just down to earth and happy to be doing what they're doing because they do it for a living, but they're passionate about it. So, I mean, I think you get a different perspective on that than the average person would,
Maybe
so to
I've
speak.
interviewed so many rock stars, and not just
You're not name
women.
dropping, are you? Are you name dropping?
Who, me? Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper? Never.
Never.
Well, the thing is that not just single members of bands, but I've interviewed entire bands. Like I did one of the very first West Coast interviews with Talking Heads, and that was incredible. And that's quoted a lot in my book as well. And in the audiobook version, there's original interview bites of that along with all the others. And I
nice.
Also interviewed the Ramones, and of course, being a punk rocker just about at the time, that was super exciting for me. So there have been tons and tons of interviews that I loved doing. And then later in life, I interviewed so many people for print and for video as well, because I was the producer and creator of BMG's music video magazines. That was exciting. And one of my favorite print interviews was Little Richard, who I'd been a fan of as a little kid. And he was great to spend hours with and talk to. And Just about all of my interviews were great. I can't think of any that were.
How did you end up interviewing Linda Lovelace, of all people?
How did I end up interviewing her? I don't know how it happened. Can't tell you. Sorry.
Well, of all the people you've interviewed, here's a couple questions for you. But of all the people you've interviewed, who was there one that was the most uncomfortable?
Well,
just based on the personality you were dealing with, and
it's not based on their personality. What made these two uncomfortable was the fact that I had just interviewed John Lennon, and he'd been shot and killed, and this was days later, and I'd already had these scheduled, and I couldn't break them up because I already had specials that I was scheduled to write on them for RKO Radio. So I had to interview Neil Diamond, and I had to interview Barry Manilow. And the interviews themselves weren't bad, but I still felt so terrible because the bulk of me wanted to get out of rock radio and never do it again. But goodness to say, that didn't happen.
And back before the internet, a lot of your interviews, obviously, before the internet, when you were preparing for a Neil Diamond or a Barry Manilow or whoever it might be, what was your process? I mean, today you can Google Barry Manilow and pull up thousands of pages of information. But back then, were you researching in libraries and rock and roll books? And
yes, it was a lot different then. I went out and bought every rock and roll book that was on the shelves. And I don't know, you can only see really one or two shelves in back of me in my home office, but they're all there. And every one that I could have interviewed, if I interviewed one that somebody had written, like George Martin or something, that was so exciting to be able to do. But RKO Radio basically bought the books for me. So I have my own rock radio library pretty much.
Wow.
Out of who would be the one interview, maybe other than Ringo, that you'd want to be able to do that you haven't been to so far?
Oh, there's so many of them. I have favorite bands that I love. The Kinks. I would love to have interviewed them. AC/DC. I would love to have interviewed them. And one of my favorite bands from years ago that I actually just saw recently, about a year and a half ago, the Steve Miller Band.
Oh, okay.
I would love to interview him because he still sounded so great and his songs are still so amazing. One of my favorite songs of all times is still The Joker. And I adore him and I adore it. And there's tons of rock stars that I wish I'd been able to interview, even ones that I met. For example, like I met The Clash, but I didn't get to interview them and do a special with them. So, there's lists and lists and lists.
And for some of them, it's not too late. Maybe you will.
Well, we'll see. I don't really do rock radio interviews anymore for a living. I haven't. I've just been TV production and everything until the COVID hit and everything. And then, because that basically put an end to my TV production work, I was able to start writing my book, which I'd been putting off for over 40 years at that point. So in 2020, I got to start writing it and feeling like, oh my God, this is so hard because I'm getting older, I'm losing my memory. How am I going to find out about all this? Because the thing that a lot of people who write memoirs have are diaries that they entered into every day of the week. But of course, I never did. I never kept a diary.
I wish I would have,
Yeah, I had a lot of my interviews to listen to. I had a lot of friends to talk to, thank God. And I had a lot of articles that I did to read. And that helped me.
Well, yeah, we discussed this a few episodes ago, but Michael Palin of Monty Python, he kept a daily journal all the way back from the early 60s leading up to Monty Python days, every single day. And they're now in print. It's fascinating. And I always said, I wish somebody would have told me when I was young, just keep a little journal because I've forgotten more things than I'll ever remember in my life. and a journal, a diary would have been an amazing thing to look back on.
Well, I was always afraid to keep anything like that because, as it says in my book, tells the story, I was raised by a dysfunctional family
Yes,
and
yeah.
a fairly violent mother. And I'm afraid that had she read anything that I was writing on a daily basis, it would have been worse all the way around. So
Would have
I'm
made things
basically
worse. Yeah,
glad I
yeah,
didn't.
indeed.
You know,
Yeah.
I feel really, when I read that part, I felt really awful. I was not raised in a dysfunctional family, but the thing that resonated with me more than anything was that for you, music became an escape. And it became an escape for me as well, because in school I was picked on mercilessly. And it was also some culture shock because I was in, you know, up until fifth grade, I was in a very upper middle class neighborhood, going to school with those kids. And then starting in sixth grade, we were integrated with kids on the others from the other side of the tracks. So for somebody like me, it became like I said, a huge culture shock. I never did adapt, and I was an easy target. School was hell, but when I got home, there was WABC radio in New York to soothe me with all those great top 40 hits. So yeah, I mean, for some people, that's your sanctuary.
Yeah.
Well, even before I was a toddler, music was what saved me from my dysfunctional family. As a toddler, like I said, I was raised on radio, just like the 80s song by Journey. And I was listening to my transistor radio that my grandparents gave me with the earplugs all day and all night because my mother wasn't paying any attention to me anyway. So it gave me incredible ways to listen to everybody from Elvis Presley to Little Richard, Fats Domino, Chuck Berry, Buddy Holly, you name it. And then finally, the Beach Boys. And then finally, the Beatles. And that was so exciting. And I went completely uphill from there. And when I was still in elementary school, I got to go see the Beatles at Dodger Stadium, thanks to the mother of a friend of mine who got some tickets for her daughter's birthday and took some friends of hers. And even though it was extremely crowded and everybody was standing up and jumping up and down and screaming, and you could barely see or hear the Beatles, it was still so exciting for me. And the first concert I'd ever been to in person live. So that started me thinking, I'm going to see concerts every time I can, every day of my life if I can, and all the rest of my life. And I still see them as much as I can to this day.
Yeah, that's a follow up right there. You're still enjoying live shows and doing things like that, which David puts on live shows all over the world, and he's still loving every second of it. I go every time I have a chance. It's just the best. It's absolutely the best. It's
yeah.
great.
I mean, with me, it's all unsigned bands, just trying to get exposure and playing on bills with other bands that are like them in front of people who really love what they do. So it's not at the level that you were operating with interviews, but yeah, it is still a lot of fun, and enables me to go to the Cavern each year. And have you been to the Cavern?
No, I haven't been to Liverpool.
Oh my God!
Oh, well,
that should definitely be on your bucket list.
Yes, but one thing I do have is a piece of the original Cavern Club. When it was shut down, the bricks were taken off, and I was working for Dick Clark at the time, and I read about that, and I thought, wow, this will make great prizes for people if we have a contest. And sure enough, I got a bunch of the actual bricks, and they say Cavern Club on them, and I kept one too, and people were so excited to win them, and Dick was thrilled.
Oh, nice.
That's great.
Well, speaking of Cavern Club bricks, there is a Cavern Club Walk of Fame on Matthew Street, which are all bricks of everybody who's played the Cavern.
Wall of Fame.
With a Wall of Fame. Yeah, Wall of Fame. And I don't know if you know this or not, Laurie, but Mr. David Bashir has a brick on that wall. He was honored with that this year. There's a picture. He's right above Stephen Van Zandt. And
right Right next to Clem Burke of Blondie.
Next to Clem Burke of Blondie, right outside. Is that right outside the Cavern Pub?
It's right outside the Cavern Pub, which is right across from the Cavern Club, as you know. That's where the wall is. I guess there was no room at the Cavern Club entrance to do the wall, so they did it across. And
David's done
the
international pop overthrow for 20 years at the Cavern, so they celebrated his 20-year anniversary with a nice brick on the wall of fame.
I do hope, Laurie, that one day you make it out there.
Well, I've been invited to Beatles tours in Liverpool a lot, and hopefully I will. But, I'm already traveling and promoting my book so much anyway that I can only do a little bit at a time.
Of course.
Sure.
Eventually,
well, yeah. So you are doing that. You're traveling and doing book signings. Is it mostly West Coast right now? Do you get this direction in the East Coast?
Yes, I just did the 29 Palms book festival.
Oh, wow.
And earlier this year I did the Fest for Beatles fans in New York, and I'm doing the one in March also, which is actually going to be in New Jersey, just outside of New York City.
Yeah, that's up in the Meadowlands. Yeah, nice.
So I'm doing what I can, and plus I do a lot of podcast interviews, and anybody who goes onto my website, confessionsofArockandrollnamedropper.com, can see nearly all my podcasts. There's over 50 on there right now.
Nice. We're scrolling that right across the bottom live right now, and it'll be in the archives, but it's confessionsofArockandrollnamedropper.com. That's the website with all the information you could possibly want on Laurie, the book, the podcast, some cool photos, you with Paul and you with John and Yoko. It's a very cool website. Yeah.
Thanks. And there's many links to TV shows and radio shows I've been part of, and there's a lot of information and a lot of reviews and print and all that sort of thing about my book. So,
well, I mean, your life is not over, but it's been very full to date with so much stuff. I mean, do you scratch your head ever and sit back and go, "Whew, how did that happen?"
Well, I know how it happened, which is basically everything that inspired me to become a radio employee and on air. And having loved music, of course, I knew music was going to play a big part. I wasn't just going to go on some news station. I was obviously going to go on a rock station and do news or something and combine it all. And it all worked out perfectly. I've all been really, really happy about that. And then the TV production and video production I've done has also been really cool. And I write about some of that in the book as well. So I'm very happy the way my life and career turned out, even though, as I've mentioned, I was raised in a very difficult way and did have to be a teenage runaway and all that. But still, it's been worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, From what I gathered from the book, you went into radio in large part because another DJ had recommended it because he said your voice is perfect for radio.
Well, what happened was when I won those Rolling Stones Nicaragua benefit tickets, I had to go to KMET to pick them up. And my friend, who was going to be my date for the show that night, drove me, and I ran in thinking, oh, I'll just pick up the tickets from the office. But they said, no, the disc jockey on the air wants to talk to you. So they ushered me into his DJ booth, and it was B. Mitchell Reed, otherwise known as the Beamer, who was one of my absolute favorites. And he started talking to me, asking me my name, my age, where I went to school. And he said, Laurie, your voice is great. You should consider a radio career. You should be on the air. And I gasped, and I was so excited. And I thought, that's the direction my life is going to take. And yes, I was only 17 at the time, but I knew, wow, this is where it's going to go. And so I kept that in my mind, and I was able to run away successfully after trying for a number of times beforehand and think about how I was going to do it. And I went away to college at UC Santa Cruz, but unfortunately I didn't like the radio station there, so I didn't take part in it. I just started writing news stuff and things, and creating things like that there from doing concert reviews. And then after that, because I had an accident while I was at Santa Cruz, I ended up moving to Bali in Indonesia to study Balinese dance because it was supposed to help my leg and my ankle and everything. And it did. So I spent quite a while in Bali. And when I came back, I was in journalism school at UC Berkeley, and I was taking one special class. And the professor there, as he read one of my very first articles that I turned in, assignments, he said, "Laurie, you already know how to write. Why are you in school? Why are you bothering to take a journalism class? You need to go find an internship right away and you'll get a job immediately and you can quit school." And I went, "Oh my God." And I went, and this is all in the book, of course. I went and I saw what internships were available. And the one that really excited me was KFRC Newsroom in San Francisco. And I thought, oh my God, this is it. Everything's going to become true. And sure enough, not only did I get the internship, but they were so excited about my talent and what I was doing when I first started there that they offered me the news editor job, which led to me doing RKO Presents the Beatles, which was the long Beatles special, as I told you, the longest ever created for radio in the United States. And then I got to be on the air too, as a newscaster in stations around the country. I was first on WOW AM in Omaha, Nebraska. And the reason that I didn't start out on the air at KFRC is because it was the #1 radio station AM in the country. So they said, gee, as much as we'd love to put you on the air right away, we need you to go start out at another station. So I was there at WOW for a month. And then I got a job offer from King AM in Seattle. So I went there and I stayed there for over a year because it was great. I loved it there. And there were so many punk rockers there and so many great bands to see. That's where I first saw Blondie. And who else did I see there first? I can't remember. But I saw the Ramones again a couple of times. And I'd already seen them in San Francisco, of course, and a bunch of other bands, great bands. And it was just incredible. And then I got called by Dave Sholin, the music director from KFRC, and he said, "Laurie, do you want to come to London with me and Ron Hummel, our engineer producer, and we can go interview Paul and Linda McCartney?" And I said, "Yes, I'll leave Seattle tomorrow." So I did, and went to London, and that interview was absolutely amazing with Paul and Linda and their latest lineup of Wings. And then I got put on the air at KFRC, and everything since then has just been remarkable.
And your Paul McCartney. Go ahead.
I was going to say your love of punk also also created kind of an awkward encounter with a certain rock star, didn't it?
Oh, well, I don't want to talk about that. I want people to read about it in the book. Okay. But yes.
Well, how great of a teaser is that? There we go. We got all
That's
kinds
why I
of
didn't
teasers.
reveal who it was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nice. Well, what you have talked about the interview with Paul McCartney. That was during his promo time for Back to the Egg, correct?
Well, Back to the Egg had just been released.
Okay.
And we talked to them about that. And Paul and Linda were a great interview, and they loved working together, and they loved writing songs together and recording together. And Paul said, especially, "I love going on stage with Linda. She's not just my wife, she's my best friend. So it's wonderful to have her." And Linda admitted that, yes, sometimes it had been really freaky for her because she wasn't a musician. She was a photographer, first thing first. And but becoming a musician became better for her with each and every concert and with all the people in Wings that helped her out and Paul helping her out. So it was great to hear about the support that he gave her. It was just wonderful. And they were so kind and loving to each other and to me too. It was just amazing.
I can't imagine. I
find it interesting that some of the biggest geniuses in rock and roll history, like John and Paul, Brian Wilson, and I'll add Michael Brown of the Left Bank to that list. I know others may disagree, but given what he's done, not just with the Left Bank, but with Stories and the Beckys, I think it's sheer genius. But all four of those have one thing in common: they all got their wives involved in what they were doing somehow, which not every rock star did. But yeah, and of course the love story of Paul and Linda is really remarkable. But John, of course, got Yoko very much involved in his music and hers, and Brian Wilson did produce sides for Marilyn, his wife, and Michael Brown produced an album for his wife, Yvonne Vitale. So I don't know if that's just coincidence or there's something to it, but
well, John talked at length about how he ended up meeting Yoko. He told the whole story, which, since we were told not to ask about the past or the Beatles and just Double Fantasy and going forward, it was so amazing and wonderful to have John tell about how he first met Paul and then tell the super long story of first meeting up with Yoko and how they had their first date just a couple of years later and did their first recording, which was super cool because they were able to record their very first album together, Twin Virgins. And he was so excited about hearing Yoko sing, and he started doing impressions of her too. And she was happy to hear that. And Yoko said afterward that John had helped her from being an avant-garde art snob to being into pop media. And John was excited to say that Yoko had turned him on to the art world too. And so they were just in love with each other, and they were such a great couple and such fans of each other and each other's talent and all the songs that they both wrote for Double Fantasy.
Yeah. Now, when you got this interview opportunity, this just kind of fascinates me. So this was at the Dakota, the interview? Was this did it take place at the Dakota?
Yes, of course.
Right. In their home.
Well, not in their apartment. They were doing their Rolling Stone photography bit with upstairs before our interview. So our interview was in their private office, not the one with their staff. And that was very exciting because it was so well decorated and so cool to hang out in. And I got to sit next to John. Well, actually, he came and sat next to me on the love seat, just, inches away for hours that day. And
see, that's where I was leading to. You're sitting, because I've read and seen other interviews with you where you're sitting on the love seat with John Lennon. I don't get in awe and get speechless around celebrity. I never have. But I think that might be one where I would sit there and just not know how to act because it would be so surreal.
Well, I know when I met Brian Wilson in his house to interview him, I was sitting in a chair probably about, I don't know, maybe 2 feet from his face. And I had an out of body experience. I could not believe that this man was that close to me, my idol, So yeah, I mean, did you feel that way? You'd already interviewed Paul by then, though. So
yes, I'd already been interviewed and kissed by Paul.
Yeah. So
no, actually, I interviewed him, but they asked questions too, and it was thrilling to sit close to Yoko Ono, and it was even more thrilling, I have to admit, to sit inches away from John and have him validate and compliment everything I said, all the comments and questions that I came up with, he said things like, "Yes, Laurie. Yes, love. Exactly. That's it." And it just made me feel so cool. And he would do things like push his glasses, his round glasses down his nose and look at me over his eyes, with his eyes and smile. And he was my idol. I was in awe.
Do you still see those moments in your head very clearly after all these years?
Absolutely.
See, that's awesome too. I just think it's that's really great. That you created that, or that experience was created through your vast experience and knowledge, and you got that opportunity, and just amazing, just amazing. And I know, as you said, one of the greatest days of your life, and also one of the worst, which is understandable.
Well, as I mentioned in my book, first of all, it's going to be the 44th anniversary this December 8th of John Lennon's last day on the planet and his last interview, which I conducted for RKO Radio. And I still say and still feel it was both the best and the worst day of my life. Not one of the best and worst, but the best and the worst.
But on the other hand, I mean, what happened. If you could go back, and I don't think you would not want to do that interview, even knowing what happened mere hours later. I think anybody would love to have been in that position.
So even though back knowing what happened, that would be a bizarre interview. I can tell
well,
you.
it's just I can understand where it's the greatest and also the worst, but at the same time, it's like, you have to be so incredibly grateful for that opportunity and to be there, because nobody else in the world can say they did what you did. And
well, I am incredibly grateful, and my co-interviewer Dave Sholin feels grateful too. But the thing is, for just about 44 years now, I've felt extremely guilty as well, because I was approached and contacted by that creepy assassin, and I didn't, as I've mentioned, recognize that he had a gun in his pocket, and I should have gone to the security team at the Dakota and said, "Get rid of this guy. He's bugging me. He'll bug people. He shouldn't be here." And had I done that, maybe they would have looked and seen the gun in his pocket. Maybe they would have called the police, who would have picked him up. I don't know. But that's one of the major guilt feelings I've ever had in my life.
It's natural to feel guilty given what happened, but I'm sure and I wasn't there, so forgive me if I'm, prognosticating in any way, but I mean, based upon what I read, I mean, there's no way you could have known. Well, I mean, there are creepy people around all the time, and most of them are harmless. I mean, there's no way you could have known that he had a gun or what his intentions were.
Well, if I looked carefully, and if I was familiar with seeing guns that people carry, maybe I would have seen the gun in his pocket. I mean, the impression of the gun in his pocket. You never know. And why didn't I complain about him? Because I was busy going off to my friend's office and getting away from him. But too bad, because like I said, had I done that, maybe it would have made a difference.
Yeah. Well, life just happens. And, you were doing what you always did. You're doing your job, and you're doing what being a professional and doing that kind of thing, and things happen. But it's completely understandable that you have those feelings, because you were so closely tied to it.
But another thing I feel guilty about is, before we set up the interview time and date, Yoko had her astrologer give us all calls and ask our birthdays and questions about us and that sort of thing. And so that's how December 8th, 1980 was chosen. And all I can think about is, oh my God, what if I'd been born on a different date or time? Maybe it would have been a different day. Maybe John would still be alive. So I still have that guilt as well.
Wow.
I really hope you get over it at some point. I know it's probably the most difficult thing, but it's such a shame that that's hanging over you, because honestly, there really was probably nothing I mean, there was nothing you could have done unless you went way above and beyond.
I've tried so much over the years to get the guilt off my shoulders. And every once in a while I feel a little better, but it's very difficult. And I still have myself to blame for a lot of things.
Well, and as I said, it's understandable. We don't, none of us we're in that position. And, as much as we can say, we really hope you come to terms with it. It's like a lot of things in life. You were there, it affected you, and you're the only one that knows how it affects you. But,
Well, now that people are reading my book, they know how that it affects
now. Yeah. Well, and again, I like to bring it up. I didn't put the picture up, but this is the full cover right there. Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper: My Life Leading Up to John Lennon's Last Interview. Ms. Laurie Kaye. It's available at all the normal places, Amazon, that you might go to, and the website down below, Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper.com. Everything you want to know about Laurie and the book and podcasts and photos. It's a great website. I just want to keep getting that in there because the poster of the book is right behind you on your bookcase there, and just fantastic. And if you see Laurie out at one of these book shows, conventions, Beatle Fest, and whatnot, make sure you drop by, pick up a copy, and get it autographed, because that's pretty special stuff. I'm still jealous of the grapefruit book that's autographed there. I can't get that out of my head. So,
well, thank you. And I should mention that the cover of my book was created using the photo taken of me and John and Yoko at the tail end of our interview. And this was right before we all made plans to get together in a couple weeks after the interview in San Francisco, and they were going to be there and go to Yoko's favorite Japanese restaurant there, which was super exciting to me to be able to think ahead of talking to them about personal things and our commonalities and all that stuff. I was really excited. And anyway, the incredible artist who did the book cover, Mick Haggerty, is a Grammy award-winning album cover designer and music video director. So it was great to have him do my book cover.
Wow.
I wanted to ask you also about the top 100 of the 70s program that you did. I mean, I grew up on top 40 radio, mostly in the early. So I think I'm around the same age as you, so that fascinates me. Was the top 100 chosen based upon chart position, or were there other factors?
Well, yes, they were all literally the top 100 songs of the 70s on charts. And there were so many incredible artists. That's why I got to interview tons of them. And, like I was telling you about George Harrison, Mick Jagger, David Bowie, and there were so many more as well. And the special was very, very popular. And it was RKO Radio and Drake Chenault, another big radio company. And I ended up going to work for Drake Chenault after the John Lennon situation, before the John Lennon situation, just before, and writing and producing a show for them called SatCon 1, which was a big, long, phony, live, international series of rock concerts. And that was very popular too, even though I wasn't nearly as excited about that.
Good stuff. Yeah, David's a very, very big 70s fan, as am I. And we talk about all the interviews you've done. We do the same thing with Material Issues, and not quite at the level that you have, but we've interviewed so many bands, artists from the 60s and the 70s that their story just needs to be archived for forever. So materialissues.com is where all the archives are. And this episode number 181 will exist in the archives for as long as this internet exists. So
when John had passed, I was a student at NYU, And my friend Steven, who was another Beatles fan, well, who wasn't, but we used to talk about going up to the Dakota because we had heard that, if we catch John maybe walking around in Central Park or near the deli he used to eat at, that as long as we were cool, he would probably talk to us. And we always thought about going, and we always figured, well, we'll go, another time, and another time became another time. Obviously, who knew that there would be no other time after that?
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
indeed.
I don't know if the morning after you saw me on the Today Show, they had me as a guest because
Wow.
Possible.
I'd been one of the last, to hang out with John Lennon and talk to him, and that I almost felt like crying through the whole time I was there. And then just after that, I got my flight back to San Francisco and immediately started listening to the several-hour interview with John and Yoko and turning it into what I tragically had to write, which was John Lennon, the Man, the Memory. That's the name I came up with, which was this special that we were going to actually not do, before he was shot and killed. We were not going to turn it out until the next Valentine's Day because it was going to be a love special. And instead, it was basically all about losing him. And it was I dedicated it to Yoko. And it was a really good special. And Dave Sholin did the audio, and Ron Hummel produced it, and I wrote it. And
was this an audio only interview, or was anything video? Was there video involved?
It's an audio only interview.
Okay, all right, which makes sense because you're doing radio work. But I didn't know if anybody was doing video. But that had to be incredibly difficult, just listening to all the few hours of interview after everything that happened. I can't even wrap my head around how strange that it would have to have been.
Right. And looking at my picture with John and Yoko just made me cry every time I looked at it. So it was a very emotional thing for me to do. I was in a hotel. KFRC put me up at a hotel, and I spent 2 days writing it, and then after that, turned in my script to Ron and Dave, and it aired.
Fell to pieces for a little bit. Yeah.
Less than a week. It aired the Sunday after John got shot and killed, which was a Monday.
Amazing.
So after all this, what do you end up doing next? I read that you were been in the horror film business for a little bit.
Well, actually, it was me working on a horror film video magazine, and then I did BMG's music video magazines, everything from Metalhead to the one that I created, which was Country Music Video Magazine, which meant going to Nashville a lot and interviewing a lot of country stars, and that was really exciting too. Everybody from Marty Stewart to you name it. I interviewed them practically. And then those ended, and I basically went into TV production and doing everything from videos to TV promos and all kinds of things, and did those for years and years, and commercials. And then, like I said, in 2020, when the pandemic hit, that's when everything ended. And even though I did go back to work in production about a year later, before that, I nearly finished my book. And the minute my job was over in 2021, I went back to the book. And ever since then, that's all I've done. Worked on the book and worked on promoting it and publicizing it. And that keeps me very, very, very busy.
Sure.
Which is great.
Sure, yeah, it's awesome that it does. Are there any other projects you have in mind?
Everybody asks me, are you going to write a second memoir? Are you going to write more? And I there's a couple of things. I just don't have the time, number one. And I also am not sure that I have the memory for all the details. And no doubt I could, but until I really have time, I don't know that I will. I've just got too much to do going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I also, to be very honest, have my own independent small business. I own property in Joshua Tree and a short-term rental business there that is a lot of work too. So
I'll bet.
yes,
Yeah.
I'm very, very busy.
Nice. Well, that's great. It's awesome to be very busy still with something that you're passionate about, which is this book. So I hope everybody grabs a copy of it. I hope everybody comes out to see you at book signings, and we wish you the best. It's right there. I'm gonna pop that picture back up. It's Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper: My Life Leading Up to John Lennon's Last Interview. Laurie Kaye. Laurie, it's been fantastic talking with you here on Material Issues.
Yes,
I mean,
it has.
what an amazing career so far. It's not over. You're still out there working it. So we don't like to make this sound like it's an in memoriam, because you're still busy as can be. But you've had an awesome career. You've done so much, and for people like David and I, who music is a passion, just the name dropping that you're able to do is mind boggling.
Thank you.
It's just wonderful. So best of luck with this book, and best of luck with everything in the future. And I hope I hope you can just find happiness in the gratefulness of everything you've been able to do, and be proud of all the accomplishment. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm sure trying, and I hope people let me know what they think about my book. I'm pretty sure they'll love reading it and want to keep reading it page after page after page and not put it down.
Most of the reviews I've seen have been stellar. So
yeah, they have been. And I've had a great conversation with the both of you too. Thank you so much.
Well, thank
you.
You're
so much for being here, Laurie. And since we live not too far from each other, maybe we can have lunch and you can autograph my book.
I'd be thrilled to, of course.
Thank you.
And if that happens, then I'm going up to Beetle Fest in New Jersey, and I'll be, because I'm over here in South Jersey. So we'll cover you on both sides of the coast here.
Awesome. That'd be
Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper.com. That's where you get in touch with Laurie and let her know what you think of the book. That's after you buy it. All right. Go out there and get it right now. Laurie, have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And we thank you again for being here. Material Issues. Have a good one.
Thanks so much, Laurie. It was great.
It's been a pleasure.
Good night.
Night.
Well, there you have it, David. Wow, that was a lot of fun. That was really great.
It's such a shame that it's such a shame that she has to carry the guilt. Now, again, we weren't there, so we don't know what kind of I'm sure she in deference to her, I won't mention his name either. But I'm sure he did give off quite a creepy vibe. Not only that, but in the verbal exchange they have, he was very off-putting. But like I said, there are always creeps around celebrities, and 99.9% of them are harmless. There was really no way that she could have possibly known. Maybe she could have gone to one of the guards over at the Dakota and said something, but again, that may not have even done any good. And I'm
hindsight's always 20/20.
I'm sure the gun wasn't exactly exposed either. Who knows? It's just a shame that she has to carry that kind of guilt with her, because
but it's understandable.
I don't think there's anything. I don't think she did anything right, but I don't think she was remiss in anything.
But she alluded to a lot of really cool mysteries and stories within the book. So if you want to find out even more, it's Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper.com. The book, you could Google it. It's out there on Amazon. David's got his copy right there.
It's a very enjoyable read. It'll keep you awake for a couple of nights.
Nice. Well, I think everybody needs to go out, especially if you're a Beatles fan, but music fan in general. So yeah, it was a great interview. That was a good get. Thank you, David. We appreciate Laurie being here.
Speaking of good gets, you've got one coming up.
Next week.
We don't have anyone on the docket for next week, so it'll likely be Mark and me talking about new releases and other stuff that's going on in the world of
playing
music.
Some music. We'll have a good time. Maybe have a Stump the Bash. We'll have a good time next week. It'll be the first Wednesday in December for the holiday season here. So that'll be fun. But coming up December 11th, 2 Wednesdays from now, you don't see a whole lot of interviews with this guy over the years, but boy, he's one of my favorite artists in the last, when did that first album come out? 1996.
Yeah, it was definitely in the 90s.
Well, anyhow, the Orgone Box. If you were a fan of, he doesn't really like to describe himself as psychedelic, but it's kind of pop psych.
Sure.
Pop music with a psychedelic bent. But Rick Corcoran of the Orgone Box is going to be here in 2 weeks. He's put out a brand new single on Bandcamp called Web of Melancholia, which we will have that to play on the show. But he also just sent me a second track that he completed. And we will have a little Material Issues premiere of that track in 2 weeks. We'll play that as well.
Wow.
But Rick's working on a whole album. It's probably going to be out here in the early part of 2025. So if you're an Orgone Box fan, and there's a lot out there, haven't heard a whole lot from Rick Corcoran in a lot of years. He'll be here on Material Issues December 11th. And then after that, we've got, as always, a lot of irons in the fire. So,
and of course, we've got the holiday season, so we'll see what that brings.
And we're approaching episode 200. We're going to figure out something interesting to do for that episode as well. So if you haven't subscribed at materialissues.com, make sure you do that. Let all your friends know. We really appreciate you hanging out with us here on this program of music and stuff. And cheers. It's been a great night, and I hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving. Tomorrow's a big family day for so many people. And
we really hope everyone watching has a wonderful Thanksgiving, assuming you celebrate it, of course.
Indeed.
We might have some people
here in the
right now.
US of A, yes. It's all good. Well, everybody have a great night. We'll catch you back here next Wednesday, December 4th, materialissues.com. We'll do some new releases. We'll listen to some music. We'll play some Stump the Bash. We'll have a great time. Happy Thanksgiving, all. Have a great night. Love to Rena.
Love to Jazz.
We got one last comment. We're going to get happy Thanksgiving. Thank you, Tim.
Right back at you, Tim.
Cheers, everybody. Good night.